We had so many challenging things to deal with, but I still loved him.
I mean, you're only on this planet for so long.
You think you know Patrick Swayze? The heartthrob, the icon, the man who made millions believe that nobody puts baby in a corner. But what if I told you the man behind the legend never set out to be a star? What if the spotlight was never something he chased, but something that found him? Long before red carpets and standing ovations, Patrick was just a Texas boy with a dream stitched together from rodeo dust and ballet shoes. His mother was a dance teacher, tough as nails, graceful as silk. His father, a cowboy with calloused hands and a quiet code of honor. From them, Patrick inherited a strange mix of softness and steel, a dancer's soul in a fighter's body. In Houston, he didn't fit in. He was too elegant for the football crowd, too rugged for the theater kids. But somehow, he stood tall in both worlds, defying every box people tried to put him in. That contradiction made him magnetic. Then came Dirty Dancing, a low-budget film nobody bet on. But the moment he stepped on screen as Johnny Castle, the world stopped. Women fell in love, men stood a little straighter, and teenagers tried to recreate the iconic lift-in pools everywhere for the next 30 years. But Patrick wasn't just a pretty face with sharp cheekbones and smoother moves. He followed it up with Ghost, and suddenly he wasn't just a dancer or a leading man, he was a vessel for raw emotion. His performance wasn't just acted, it was felt. By the time he earned a Golden Globe nomination, he had gone from breakout star to Hollywood soul. Yet the fame never owned him. He rode motorcycles, did his own stunts, turned down roles that didn't feel right. This wasn't a man chasing cameras, he was chasing meaning. He lived fully, loved deeply, and worked fiercely. And that's what makes what came next so heartbreaking. Because behind every spotlight, there is a shadow. And Patrick's would arrive not as a scandal or a slip, but as a silent thief, unseen, uninvited, and unforgiving. At first, it was just a nagging discomfort. Nothing dramatic. A bit of stomach pain here, a late night cramp there. For a man in his mid-50s who had spent decades pushing his body through dance rehearsals, stunt work, and grueling filming schedules, it felt normal. Maybe it was something he ate. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was just age. But it wasn't. The pain didn't fade. It lingered. Then it sharpened. At night, it gnawed at him, stealing sleep, clouding his mind. Lisa, his wife and anchor for over 30 years, urged him to get checked out, and he did reluctantly. What started as routine tests turned into something far more urgent. Blood work, scans, biopsies. The phone call came quickly, but the words dropped like lead. Stage 4 pancreatic adenocarcinoma. It's called the silent killer for a reason. Pancreatic cancer doesn't announce itself with clear symptoms. It sneaks in undetected until it's already metastasized. For Patrick, it had already spread to his liver. The prognosis? Grim. Median survival, 3 to 6 months. Most patients don't make it that far. In that moment, time stood still. Hollywood paused, but Patrick didn't. He didn't scream. He didn't break. He looked his doctors in the eye and said, what are we gonna do about it? That's who he was. This wasn't about denial. He knew exactly what he was up against. But he also knew something the cancer couldn't touch. His will, his grit, his refusal to be written off. Together with Lisa, they dove into action. Not chasing miracles, but chasing time. Each day became a battle. Every hour mattered. When most people would crumble under the weight of the diagnosis, Patrick stood tall. Not for the cameras, not for a headline, but for life, for love. for the simple, sacred act of not giving up. In the quiet war inside his body, an invisible enemy was gaining ground. But Patrick, he was just getting started. From the outside, it looked like madness. A man newly diagnosed with one of the deadliest forms of cancer, stepping onto a film set, not to say goodbye, but to take on one of the most physically demanding roles of his career. That man was Patrick Swayze. Just months after his diagnosis, while undergoing aggressive treatment, he signed on to star in The Beast, a gritty crime drama filled with long shoot days, high-stress scenes, and emotional depth. Network execs panicked. Insurance companies hesitated. But Patrick, he showed up every single day. He refused body doubles, memorized every line, delivered performances that were sharper, deeper, and more raw than ever before. Because this wasn't just a role, it was defiance. His body was tired. The chemo drained him. He battled nausea, fatigue, tremors. But he kept filming, 5 days a week, 14 to 16 hours a day. And on weekends, instead of resting, he was in the hospital, hooked up to IV bags, facing chemicals that scorched his insides. Most people would have quit. No one would have blamed him. But Patrick believed something powerful. Work was therapy. As long as he was acting, he wasn't a patient. He was an artist, a fighter, a man still in control of his life. Behind the scenes, he waged war with his own body. He would sip herbal tea to keep down the nausea, do his own makeup with trembling hands, then walk on set like nothing was wrong. He laughed with crew members, kept the energy light, and never once asked for pity. But there were cracks, moments when he would slip away between takes, only to be found in his trailer, curled in pain, soaked in sweat. Still, when someone knocked, he'd open the door with a smile and say, "Let's go again." The cameras captured brilliance, but off camera was where his true courage lived. His best friend from high school, Thomas Doyle, had flown in when he heard the news. He wasn't a celebrity, just a quiet soul who knew the real Patrick before the lights, before the fame. One afternoon on set, Thomas found him slumped in a chair, eyes hollow, hands trembling. Patrick looked up and whispered, "I just need someone to stay." Not to fix it, just stay. So Thomas stayed, through chemotherapy, through shoots, through silences. And in those quiet hours, Patrick wasn't a star. He was a man, fragile, fighting, and still refusing to fall. Because warriors don't always roar. Sometimes they whisper and still keep walking. On screen, he was still the storm. Patrick Swayze, in every frame of The Beast, commanded attention with that familiar intensity, eyes locked in, voice steady, presence undeniable. Viewers saw a man in control, a detective chasing justice, a soul haunted by secrets. But what they didn't see was the man beneath the costume, the man unraveling. Each morning began like a military operation. He would rise slowly, his joints stiff, stomach in knots. He refused assistance. Pride ran deep in him, deeper than the pain. He would apply his own makeup, his hands trembling slightly, hiding the pallor that chemotherapy had carved into his skin. Lisa wasn't there this time. Instead, Thomas Doyle, his old friend, now served as his quiet guardian on set, keeping watch from the shadows. Sometimes Patrick would vanish between scenes, not out of ego, but out of necessity. Crew members later recalled how he'd disappear for 10, 15 minutes. When they found him, it was usually in his trailer, curled in silence, breathing deeply, willing the nausea to subside. Then he'd stand up, fix his shirt, walk back on set and say, "Ready when you are." That was the kind of strength no gym could build, no script could teach. The production team, moved by his determination, offered to shorten his hours, adjust the schedule. He refused. "I'll let you know when I can't do it anymore," he said. That day never came, but behind the quiet defiance was a slow erosion. His hair thinned, his muscles weakened, and his vibrant eyes dulled. Yet he fought not for sympathy, but for normalcy. He believed that if he could just keep showing up, keep delivering lines, then maybe, just maybe, the cancer couldn't take everything. And then there was the moment no one could forget. One late afternoon, in a rare pause between scenes, Thomas entered Patrick's trailer to find him sitting on the floor. He wasn't crying. He wasn't speaking. He was just still. His shirt was soaked with sweat. His breathing was shallow. Thomas knelt beside him. "I'm here," he said. Patrick looked up. "Don't say anything," he whispered. "Just stay with me." So Thomas stayed, in silence, in stillness, in the space where words were useless, but presence was everything. Outside, the cameras rolled. Inside, the man who once danced across stages was learning how to sit still with pain. And yet, he kept going. Because for Patrick, quitting wasn't in the script. By spring of 2009, the fight had taken its toll. The cameras had stopped rolling. The set was gone. And for the first time in a long time, Patrick Swayze wasn't preparing for a scene. He was preparing for the inevitable. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no press releases, just a quiet decision between him and his oldest friend. "I want to go home," he said to Thomas. "Not to Hollywood, not to the hospital, home, to the ranch." Nestled in the rolling hills of California, their ranch had always been more than a piece of land. It was sanctuary, freedom, a place where the world fell away and life returned to its simplest, purest form. There were no scripts here, no paparazzi, just dirt paths, the smell of hay, and the rhythmic sound of horses trotting across open fields. Patrick had always loved this place. It was where he rode bareback under golden skies, where he and Lisa built memories that had nothing to do with red carpets, where his soul felt grounded, where he felt like himself. But things had changed. His once powerful frame had shrunk, whittled down by months of chemo and endless pain. He couldn't ride anymore. Mounting a horse was too much. So he stood at the fence instead, watching, breathing it all in. Sometimes Thomas stood beside him in silence. They didn't need to speak. The land did the talking. Back inside the house, life slowed to a gentle crawl. Patrick would sit in his favorite chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket, sipping warm tea. He still cracked dry jokes, still smiled, still listened to music from the old jukebox in the corner. But every day he moved a little slower, spoke a little softer, slept a little longer. Thomas managed the ranch now, cooked simple meals, administered medication. He wasn't a nurse, but he didn't need to be. He was there, and that was enough. The media, ever hungry, lingered beyond the property lines. Long lenses tried to capture glimpses of the fading star. Eventually, they got their shot. Patrick walking slowly, thinner than ever, a hat pulled low over his sunken eyes. The headlines were cruel, wasting away, unrecognizable. But they didn't see the quiet moments inside, the late night talks, the hand on the shoulder, the long pauses filled with meaning. They didn't see the strength it took to say, "This is enough." Patrick hadn't given up. He had simply chosen to spend whatever time he had left in the only place that ever truly felt like him. Home. By late August, the stillness settled in. Patrick was no longer walking to the fence. No more tea by the window. No more quiet rides through memory. His body, once a temple of discipline and movement, had grown still. Bones frail, voice barely audible, skin like paper. Thomas had stopped hoping for good days. Now he just prayed for peaceful ones. The doctors had come and gone. So had the questions, the scans, the drugs. What remained was only the sound of breath, sometimes shallow, sometimes missing entirely, for seconds that felt like hours. On September 11th, the house was quiet, cloaked in the weight of waiting. That afternoon, Thomas sat beside the bed, reading old letters Patrick had once written but never sent. Musings, dreams, regrets. Patrick drifted in and out, no longer speaking, barely reacting. Then something shifted. His eyes opened, just a little. His lips moved. Thomas leaned in. "I love you, man," Patrick whispered. Barely a sound, more like a breath carrying meaning. Thomas blinked. "I know. I'm here." There were no tears in that moment, no dramatic monologue, just two lifelong friends sharing the kind of goodbye only silence could hold. It wasn't about saying everything. It was about saying enough. That night, Patrick slipped deeper into unconsciousness. The next morning, his breathing slowed. Long pauses between shallow inhales. At 10:07 a.m., September 14th, it stopped altogether. No alarms, no final gasps, just one last breath and stillness. Thomas sat still for a long time. Then he reached over, took Patrick's hand, and whispered back, "You didn't die alone, brother." And in that whisper was everything Patrick had lived for. Not the fame, not the applause, just love, loyalty, and the dignity of being remembered for who you were, not just what you did. Patrick Swayze's death didn't break headlines the way scandals do. It didn't trend. It didn't come with drama or fame-chasing chaos. It came quietly, just like he had lived. But make no mistake, the world felt it. In the weeks that followed, tributes poured in, from co-stars, directors, fans across continents. But the ones that mattered most came from those who had seen Patrick not as a star, but as a man. People didn't talk about his films first. They talked about his grit, his honesty, his discipline, the way he still smiled when chemo burned through his veins, the way he walked on set even when his knees buckled, the way he said, "I'm a miracle," and actually believed it. Patrick's story wasn't about defeating cancer. It was about redefining what it means to live with it. He showed the world that even in the face of death, there's room for laughter, for loyalty, for love. That dignity doesn't come from hiding your pain, but from carrying it with grace. His friend Thomas never published a memoir. He didn't sell the story. He just kept the ranch running, kept the porch light on. And when asked about Patrick, he would simply say, he was a man who kept showing up. For life, for people, for himself. That's the legacy, not the roles, not the awards, but the man who never let suffering steal his soul, who refused to let fame become his identity, who whispered, "I love you" as his final line and meant it. Patrick lived as he died, fully, fearlessly, and with someone holding his hand. And maybe, just maybe, that's what real strength looks like. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but the one that endures. The one that chooses kindness when anger is easier. The one that chooses presence over pity. So if you're watching this, remember this. You don't have to be famous to leave something behind. You just have to show up like Patrick did until the very end. Till